For most people today, Iran is known as a country where women must wear the hijab, where religious leaders hold ultimate power, and where hostility toward the United States has lasted for decades. But what if I told you that only 50 years ago, Iran looked completely different? In the 1960s and 1970s, women in Iran could walk the streets wearing miniskirts. At beaches, people relaxed in swimsuits and enjoyed the sun. The images from that time are shocking to many people today. Even more surprising is the fact that Iran was once one of America's most important allies in the Middle East. So how did this country transform from a close partner of the United States into one of its greatest enemies? The answer begins in 1979, with the event known as the Iranian Revolution. To understand this story, we need to go back to the Cold War. During the Cold War, the world was divided between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Iran sat directly south of the Soviet Union on the map. That made it strategically important. For the United States, Iran acted as a barrier that could prevent Soviet influence from spreading into the Middle East. At that time, Iran was ruled by a monarch known as the Shah. His name was Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah strongly supported Western modernization. His government pushed rapid economic development, industrial growth, and cultural changes. Cities modernized quickly, Western education expanded, and Iranian society became increasingly secular. But there was another side to this modernization. The Shah ruled with an iron fist. His government relied heavily on a feared secret police organization known as Savak. Political opponents were arrested, tortured, and sometimes killed. As economic inequality grew and political repression increased, resentment began to spread across the country. At the same time, many religious leaders believed the Shah was destroying traditional Islamic values. These tensions slowly built up over many years. Then in 1979, everything exploded. A massive revolution swept across Iran. Millions of people took to the streets to protest the Shah's rule. The leader who eventually emerged from this movement was a powerful religious figure named Ruhollah Khomeini. When the Shah fled the country, Khomeini returned to Iran from exile. Soon after, the monarchy collapsed. In its place, a completely new political system was created. Iran became an Islamic republic. Religious authority replaced the secular monarchy. But the revolution did not only change Iran's government, it also transformed the country's foreign policy. The new leadership strongly opposed Western influence, especially the United States. And then, only months after the revolution, a dramatic event pushed relations between the two countries past the point of no return. In November of 1979, Iranian students stormed the American embassy in Tehran. They took dozens of Americans hostage. 52 American diplomats and citizens were held captive for 444 days. For the United States, the humiliation was enormous. The crisis dominated American news and politics for more than a year, and from that moment on, relations between the two countries collapsed completely. But the hostility did not stop there. In 1983, another devastating event occurred in Lebanon. A truck bomb exploded at a U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut. The attack killed 241 American service members. It became known as the 1983 Beirut barracks bombings. The militant group blamed for the attack was Hezbollah. The United States believed that Iran had supported and helped fund the group. This event hardened American views toward Iran even further. For decades afterward, the two countries remained bitter rivals. But the story becomes even more complicated in the early 21st century. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq in what became known as the Iraq War. The goal was to remove Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein from power. The invasion succeeded in overthrowing Saddam Hussein, but it also created unintended consequences. Iraq's new political leadership was dominated by Shia groups. Many of those groups had close ties to Iran. As a result, Iran's influence in the region actually grew stronger after the war. Analysts began to describe a so-called Shia axis stretching across the Middle East. In other words, a war meant to reshape the region ended up expanding Iran's influence. Meanwhile, another major issue was emerging: Iran's nuclear program. The international community feared that Iran might eventually develop nuclear weapons. In 2015, the United States under President Barack Obama negotiated a landmark agreement with Iran. The deal limited Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for lifting economic sanctions. This agreement became known as the Iran nuclear deal. However, the agreement did not last long. In 2018, President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the deal. Tensions between Iran and the United States rose once again. At the same time, a new regional strategy began to take shape. The United States encouraged closer cooperation between Israel and several Arab countries. These diplomatic agreements became known as the Abraham Accords. nations. The goal was to create a new regional alliance that could balance Iran's power. But in October 2023, another dramatic event shook the region. The militant group Hamas launched a large-scale attack against Israel. The event is now widely known as the 2023 Hamas attack on Israel. The attack triggered a major war and once again raised questions about Iran's role in regional conflicts. Today, the tensions between Iran, the United States, and their allies continue to shape Middle Eastern politics. With the collapse of the agreement, Iran once again began expanding its nuclear program. At the same time, tensions across the Middle East continued to rise. Then in 2025, Donald Trump returned to the presidency. His administration quickly adopted a hardline policy toward Iran. Sanctions intensified, pressure increased, and diplomatic relations grew even colder. As a result, hostility between Iran and the United States continued to deepen, and eventually, the tensions reached a breaking point. On February 28, 2026, a war involving Israel, the United States, and Iran finally erupted. And when historians trace the origins of this rivalry, they almost always return to one moment, the year 1979, the year the Iranian Revolution changed the Middle East forever.